Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the AI Executive Podcast, Morning Buzz, the special edition where we're focusing on some breaking news today. My name is Nick James. I'm usually speaking, but today I'll be hosting. Today we have in Jason, as we usually do, and also a new guest. His name is Tim. And this week today we're diving into critical AI developments every executive should have on their radar. We're also excited to welcome Tim, our guest host, and the founder of ComplianceScorecard.com. Tim's company specializes in empowering the compliance function with MSPs by streamlining compliance operations, a crucial topic in today's rapidly evolving AI landscape. Today, we'll focus on breaking news. In the wake of the recent OMB memos, federal agencies are now leading an AI revolution. This movement is driven not only by innovation, but also by a robust framework designed to integrate privacy and civil rights protections at every step. Given the significance of these developments, we thought it'd be invaluable to have Tim join us for the discussion. So, Jason, let's get started with you. Can you walk us through the new OMB memos and their implications?
Yeah, so on Monday, OMB released two memos on the heels of the executive order that was released on February 11th that President Trump focused on the AI across the federal government and really optimizing and integrating that into the environment. And so they were given each agency was given a 180-day action plan to start building this out. And this is coming off the heels of that. So it created two memos, M2521, which focuses on accelerating the use of AI, emphasizing innovation, government or governance, and public trust. And then that also identified the management practices for what they are defining as high impact AI systems and the strategy for removing barriers for AI adoption. The second one, M2522, is guidance around the acquisition of AI, aiming to boost the effectiveness, cost efficiency of procuring AI, and really start improving the process to be able to adopt AI much faster. So these are the two that just came out recently. You know, it didn't get as much buzz with all of the tariff talks that have been going on, but I think this is really transformational about how to think about AI. It really emphasizes the role of the chief AI officer across all government agencies. And I think this really fits well into a topic that we wanted to focus on
So,
and provide a lot of
so it
context to.
sounds like 22 is focused on procurement and 21 is focused on just overall removal of barriers and friction throughout government agencies, unlocking opportunities cross agency. So it sounds like they may have been misnumbered. I feel like 22 is first, right, on procurement, and 21 is more about once
Once you
procurement
procure.
opens up and opens the floodgates, how should AI be handled and empowered throughout the agencies and cross agencies? So, Tim, for you, your perspective, sir. So, in comparison, I'd love to know like what has been dismantled from the Biden administration and how is this starkly different or perhaps not so starkly different than what was the directive from the Biden administration? You're on Tim, you're on mute. Sorry.
I could just keep talking away. You can see my lips
No, go
moving. I
ahead,
can
Tim.
pretend that we're in a
Welcome to the
really
show.
bad Bruce Lee movie. But hey, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
We have to have at least one session where somebody is on mute,
Yeah.
right? So, just so I understand the question, like the differences between this administration and the past administration, is that really the crux of what you're asking?
Yeah, it's just the stance on AI, right? So like, how is the are these two OMBs unlocking opportunities that perhaps prior directives didn't offer opportunities for?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we're all aware of the sweeping changes that the government has been doing in the last, what, 30, 60, 90 days. not just in AI, but the government as a whole. But since we're specifically talking about these two new memos that came out, the adoption, use, and as Jason said, procurement of AI technologies, large language models, and all that fun, we'll bucket them into AI, right? Because there's a bunch of different acronyms in that bucket. The procurement side is really around what the government has always done is to make sure that they're buying the right stuff. They're not, wasteful spending and whatnot. But the other side of how do we actually use this effectively and safely, not just at the government, but all the way down to the small business, right? This AI revolution is happening, and so much so that our good friend Arnie over at Bellini Capital actually created the first AI and cybersecurity college. Right, we all know that this is here. This is not going away. When we look at previous administrations and what this current administration is doing, I think it's really going to help accelerate the use of artificial intelligence, large language models, generative AI. The whole point of directing how agencies within the federal government actually use this stuff. Because right now it's kind of the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
There's no governance. There's no, as I think it was Jason or maybe it was you, Nick, that said there's no chief AI officer, right?
That's
There's
right.
nobody accountable, responsible, informed. Like, hey, if we think of Racy for example, right?
Yeah.
There's no accountable, and so establishing chief AI officers, not just at every department in the government, but also in the small business and the MSPs that support them.
I think one thing that I want to pull from on what you said is effective use. I think that that's something that's being focused on now. I think past directives were really focused on just being safe and responsible.
Yep.
But I think that what has been highlighted throughout all actions of the current administration is the efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So, efficient use of AI throughout the agencies, I think, is something that's sticking out to me. Jason, what are your thoughts from a chief AI officer perspective? Like, on what's happening, what's the difference?
I think this is a great step forward in giving that accountability for the chief AI officer. I believe, putting them in the right position, making sure that they have one foot into the IT and technology and one foot into the business and the mission is going to be critical. If they're just layered under the CIO and don't really have that mission focused, this is going to be some of the struggles that they're going to see in that adoption. I love the acquisition focus because, as I spent 22 years in the government, acquisition was always the hardest part. You would spend 18, 24 months of coming up with an idea of software that you need, and then it finally getting awarded. And,
Yeah.
and by that time, it was still, valid software. In the AI world, 18 months ago, that was like GPT 3.5. Like, how outdated is that type of technology now of how rapidly things are developing? So I think that it's critical that they start doing this. Reducing that acquisition cycle is going to be critical for the government to adopt AI technologies instead of trying to build it.
I love
Yeah.
the fact that you're talking about the procurement process. I too, 20 years in the federal government, the whole RFP, the whole, like, it's just,
Mhm.
yeah, things move
Yeah. The
slow.
FAR and all of those requirements that
Yeah.
everyone has to go through that training. Yes, it was quite
So,
painful.
do you think that we're going to see a reduction in scrutiny in things like FedRAMP and the ATO process?
It's funny that you mentioned FedRAMP because obviously their big announcement just last week. We're having lots of discussion on FedRAMP. I have my own bias and my own crystal ball. If we think of how things move and how they kind of work all the way down to, mom's donut shop, my crystal ball says FedRAMP will eventually be, NIST 853 and the FedRAMP process and all of that will be the framework to be all, end all, do all. Now, that will probably take several years. You mentioned FedRAMP. The challenge with any compliance related stuff is There's too many frameworks. Heck,
There's too many.
there's even one specifically for AI, both from NIST, the National Institute of Standard, and ISO. Right? There's way too many frameworks. I think we're going to see some convergence of that over the next probably 5 to 10 years. Of we just have one framework, and maybe that's FedRAMP. That's my crystal ball, anyways.
And that's
The
that's
ATO process is really something that's in my heart. When I was in the government, it was right in the early stages of DevOps and cloud, and the initial rollout of 853. And I saw there was a pathway to get to an ATO in a day, and our agency was really leading towards that. And very similar to what Elon and all of the Doge team is facing, there was a lot of backlash saying that is completely not possible. They were able to do that years after I was able to leave, and then they made that into a continuous ATO that they would use continuous monitoring to do that. But it is possible. You've got to think a little bit differently than what the traditional government processes have been. Completely agree with Tim. There are too many processes. There are too many frameworks. That was why we designed the AI adoption management framework of bringing all of these different guidance into one thing, because all of them have good pieces, but they're not a coherent strategy. And so that's where when we did that, and I think this utilizing the AIMF will definitely help being able to identify that for that continuous strategy across the board, from ideation all the way to mission users.
so
Yeah,
let's
Jason, I was checking out the framework that you talked about on GitHub literally at 4 o'clock this morning over my coffee. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I'd like to maybe at some point dig a little deeper. Probably not today, but um, as you said, the convergence of all the different frameworks, the actual use of AI to help with that, right?
That's right.
The ability to say, like we hear a lot about framework cross mapping and all the things. Well, if we have a scientific method like NIST 8477 on framework cross mapping, we apply that method with the use of safe, secure, dependable artificial and large language models, maybe like Jason's framework. Maybe I'm attributing the framework incorrectly to you. Maybe
No,
like
I'm one of the Nick and I are both co-authors of it.
all right, so then the both of you, the framework that you've come up with, now we have some standard, we have a tool and an AI framework to kind of converge all of that together. And hopefully at some point, I think, Jason, you mentioned true ongoing continuous compliance monitoring with the use of large language and machine learning and, all the AI mouthful of acronyms.
So I want to take this back to it's funny you said the cross framework mapping.
Oh, don't get me going.
There was a company back in the day. I believe their name was the UCF, the Unified
But they
Control.
still exist.
They still exist.
Oh, yeah.
They made their money simply their entire job, and frankly, they patented an Excel sheet where they mapped controls across because this landscape. And I always say compliance is like a bunch of authorities telling you how to do the same thing using different words.
Exactly.
90% of the time, they're telling you to do the same thing. They're just using different words. So I think there's a lot of inefficiency introduced in that process, and that's why we see a lot of AI technologies that have been coming out that help you respond to like client security questionnaires. In fact, that's one of the services that we offer. But it's because there's so many authorities, whether they're clients or regulators, telling you how to do security and how you should handle their data. So let's talk a little bit about why should people who are watching today care. Like a lot of them are not in the government; they're in private sector. How is it going to? What sort of ripple effects is it going to have down in the private sector? Not down, but across in the private sector.
It's a really great question. I'm obviously going to approach that from the MSP perspective because those are our peeps that have been an MSP for 20 years. The first thing that I can think about of how it can help and affect managed service providers, IT service providers, MSPs, whatever acronym you want to use, is opportunity. And what I mean by opportunity is if you are not already having those conversations with your customer, bringing in a chief AI officer, for example, or even explaining, you should probably have one. There is a huge untapped market for being in front of your customer and talking to them about the safe, responsible, effective use of AI, procurement of AI. We know you're doing it. I mean, Copilot baked into everything right now for Microsoft. It is in the end user's face all the time. And as a managed service provider, they look to you for all things IT, which means there is a huge opportunity for you to be that subject matter expert and to make money along the way.
Jason, what do you think? How is
Well,
this?
I think I've seen this evolve in the past where the government identifies a role that is very needed because of how disorganized it is. The one that resonates with me is the chief data officer. They were one of the early ones to adopt chief data officers because they just had swells of data and they needed to corral that. And that has turned into an industry leading um, tool because everyone then realizes, oh, I have these same types of problems. So I think that the chief AI officer, even though it's, what the EO and the memos are saying is this is for federal agencies, I think state and local governments are going to need that. I think that's where we're really helping out right now in the Texas market is they need that fractional CIAO. They don't have those skills. They have very good technologists. They have very good senior leaders in different departments, but they need that AI focus, and that's where our fractional offering is very helpful for the state and local governments. But I think the same situation is true for the private sector. They're going to need in this companies that have been excelling at AI have already identified that as a need. And I found that person that has that blend of business knowledge as well as technical knowledge.
Yeah, great point.
So there are some pretty hard line sort of dates, and the timers have started as of April 7th. 180 days for to develop strategies for every agency, from what I'm reading, and then 60 days to appoint chief AI officers. Do we think we're going to make it? Tim, go first.
Well, I guess the first question I would have, and you probably have the best answer for this, is what the hell is an AI officer?
Yeah, that's
What are
right.
their roles? What are their responsibilities? Now, I have some general ideas. I kind of think I know, but who do they report to? What do they do day to day? We talked briefly about that. They can often work closely with the information officer, the security officer, but I think Jason, you said it best. They need to have one foot in business operations and one foot in technology operations, and have kind of play that split role almost similarly as a chief information security officer on the business side and on the technology side. First and foremost, who the heck is that? What do they do? And how do they operate? Probably at the end of the day, how are they compensated? Are they just get a flat salary? Do they, if they reduce risk, is there a comp plan? Right? I go to how can we as IT professionals help secure, protect, and defend the small businesses and get paid along the way.
Jason, what do you think? So we got 60 days for chief AI officers for every agency, 180 days for a strategy, and 270 days to either create new or update existing policies.
So the 60 days for appointing the chief AI officer, the Biden administration identified that in their EO that every agency must
Yeah.
have that. So they've had a long runway to be able to identify that. But exactly what Tim said, it is hard to find someone that has a very vast amount of knowledge that is that mile wide of knowledge but an inch deep, and there's very few people. I was one of those people that I loved bouncing around to different jobs in the government every 2 years. If I was there for more than 2 years, I was feeling stagnant. So I loved getting all of that experience. But I know there was a lot of people that really were those rocks and those stayed in that same organization for 20, 30 years and really don't have those skills. So being able to identify those people that have the skills that are necessary, and it's not a role that you can train. You can't train an IT person to now you've done 20 years of IT. all right, now figure out how to do this business more effectively. And so there are, some people have that mindset where they can bring those together, but I think that's going to be the hardest thing they're going to be able to do is find that personality in exactly what Tim said. Where do you put them in the organization? How do you empower them because of all of the bureaucracy and all of the layers of, oh, wait, you're not my boss. This is my boss, and I'm not going to listen to you type of mentality that occurs.
So if I was given this directive and I'm the head of an agency, and I needed to look out into my estate of senior executives and leaders, which roles do you think, Tim? Let's start with you. Would be probably the easiest to transition and probably have, let's say, 60 to 70% of the key requirements for a chief AI officer.
The pathway from hero from zero to hero. How do we get to becoming the AI officer? It's a very short window. I mean, Jason pointed out it started a while ago in the last administration, but the skill sets of the business side and the technology side, the people that are well suited for that today are those information security roles, right? Those CISO. I hate using the chief anything officer because chief has a totally different connotation to me as somebody that's black and white. If you're chief, that means you're on the board, you have an executive, like that security officer, that person that has both a technical background but also the business sense of understanding, protecting revenue, protecting data, right? The what drives the business forward on the operations side, on the go to market side, on the why are we doing this side. So I think that information security officer kind of fits a little bit of both of those roles. Um, but it does uncover a major educational gap that we have here in the US and globally for that matter, as far as how do we get from truck driver to chief AI officer, right? There is a huge gap there.
Jason?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a role. I think it's personality type that you're looking for. You're looking for a connector. Who
Okay.
is that person in your organization that doesn't care about organizational boundaries and has relationships all across departments? Those are the types of people that you want to look for to be able to do that. I think once you have those type of people, because they're very good at connecting and bringing ideas together and connecting both sides. Because I think a lot of it's going to be bringing two different departments, your IT department and your mission department, and bringing them together and let's brainstorm and come up with that. So I think that's the type of personality and the type of person you'd be looking for as you're looking to identify a chief AI officer who can work across different and have the ability not to go super technical as well as be able to understand the mission and bring people together. So I think it's going to be more of a facilitator role.
That's a really good point.
That is a really good point. It reminds me of someone I met probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. His name is Nick Shalane. He was the
I know
chief.
Nick.
You know Nick, yeah.
Yeah.
So Nick left and created a tool called Ask Sage. It's heavily focused on AI chat for government agencies. So I feel like when you were describing that personality, Jason, Nick was the first person that came to mind. What do you think?
Yes. No, he was definitely someone I connected with and followed his direction. He definitely was thinking the right way.
Yeah, I feel and his statement is always, how do we accelerate the delivery of solutions to the warfighter? And his was more in the sense of Department of Defense, but
Yep.
I think that somebody like him would be a great candidate for the chief AI officer.
And I
So
think
let's
that was where these memos of focusing at innovation was the first thing that they were focused on. Nick, myself, Paul Puckett, there's a handful of people I can tell you all across the government that were innovators that really pushed the envelope, but they get burned out very quickly
That's
with the
right.
bureaucracy. And
Yep.
it's very hard to be innovative in the government without, and be able to be bulletproof and not take things personal.
Yeah, I think just the concentration of hurdles can easily lower your endurance to get, and the finish line just keeps getting farther and farther and farther away. My hope is that these directives, these memos, start to change, but I think there's a cultural component, right? No matter what things say on paper, it's how people behave that
Yep.
really effectuate the change. So let's sort. We're coming winding down to the end of the broadcast now. So let's talk about what are the real things, like what are the real changes we need to see in order for these words to come to life from these memos. Tim, you want to take it?
Well, uh, yeah. So I have lots of thoughts, and we only have a couple seconds left, so make sure I'm being concise. The real world rubber hits the road. We talked a little bit about the soft skills from the person, right? The person leading this, being able to be a good negotiator, right? I think in the day to day activity of having a chief AI officer and then looking at all the vast things that exist around that, right? You do have one throat to choke in that chief AI officer. So you need to make sure that that person has really good negotiation skills. They don't have a really big ego, that they are able to take the hits and recognize that you're probably not going to have a lot of immediate wins, right? To be able to have that sort of, high impact and speed, but recognize you're probably not going to get there on day one. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of buy in from a lot of different personalities along the way. And as you both pointed out, having those soft skills to negotiate that, to work through that, having seen this happen in the federal government over 20 plus years, it's really that person that's going to be able to take the hits day to day, enjoy the small wins as quickly or not quickly as they come, and being able to just push the conversation to do the job day by day by day.
Jason?
Everybody can go to chat gpt and click, now I have AI in my product. But what about the protection? What about the data? What about all the other things that go into that? Those are negotiation conversations. We're literally going through them right now ourselves. A compliance scorecard. Do we add AI? Do we not add AI? I get pressure from all of our customers and even our team and even our board, which is great. I think it's awesome. We should be doing more AI work, but with the right path and the right protections and the right people.
Yeah, I think my opinion is anything that's going to help improve the acquisition process and making that easier for the government employees to be able to get that technology in their hands, because once they have it, they're going to be able to really start making significant value. But yeah, I was listening to Howard Ludwig speak a couple weeks ago, who's the Department of Interior, and he says it's easier for me to have someone do something pro bono and give it to me for free than charge me $1. Because if I go to $1, then I've got to go. I can't sole source a $1 delivery. I've got to go through this whole far process. So there's something wrong that you've got to just give. Having companies give things pro bono, they'll get the benefits in the long run, because once you start ingraining that, then it's going to be, oh, every other country needs it. All these types of other benefits is what Howard was pushing. But that process has to be redefined, especially for software. You cannot treat software like an aircraft carrier or a plane and take years and years and years for delivery.
Yeah. Very good. So we're coming off towards the end. I think this was a robust discussion. I think there's we're going to have many more discussions as we continue to unwind and as the government continues to react to these memos. I want to thank you, Tim, for joining us and I believe we have Steve Cousin to thank, our mutual connection, for the
Yep.
for putting this together. Um, Folks, I want to remind everybody to take a deep look into the memos. If you don't think you're going to be affected, I think it's a good resource to have in your back pocket anyway, because this is going to reshape how the government will put regulations together and compose regulations for at least the next 4 years. So I think it's important for everybody to understand what these memos say. They're not that hard to get through. They're not very long. So I highly encourage you all to go download it off of the White House's website and take a read. If you have any questions,
Yeah,
please.
you can actually read it. You don't need to drop it into ChatGPT and give me all the key
Yeah.
points.
No,
Yeah.
there's
So
even a fact sheet, so summarizes it in one page. So
Yes.
if you can't get through one page of reading, yeah.
so as we always say, stay curious, stay innovative, and thanks for joining us once again today. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Nick and James, thank you so much for having me.